We hope to see you again and again.
Talk to you later. Bye.
Questions and discussions. Is it okay, Oля? Do you hear us, yeah? Yeah? So can we begin? Слышно, да? Не слышно?
Не слышно.
Мы можем начинать лекцию, да?
Okay. Hello everybody, can you hear me? I'm sure you hear me very well in Australia, but probably not so well in the last rows in this room. Is it okay? Good morning in Moscow and whatever time it is in Brisbane. Hello, welcome to this video conference. Probably it's the lecture that embraces the longest possible distance in the world between Moscow and Brisbane. And my topic today, politeness patterns in modern Russian, what does it take for a language to survive a change, is will be focusing around two issues: changes and Russian language. And I should say that both issues, we feel very emotional about them. And not only we Russians here, I think everyone in the world feels emotional about their language. And you know, changes is also something that's interesting to enjoy when you look at it from outside. When you live through changes, it's probably a very interesting, but I would say emotional part of your life. So language and changes. And the outline for my lecture, please go line by line, will be first. I'm going to talk about what has changed in the last 20 years and in some of the, we would call it verbal etiquette in Russian. First, of course, I need to say a few words about how things stand. You cannot describe changes without having described how things stood before you came to this topic. So first, I will very briefly, because it's all on the slides, basically on the slides, say a few words, they are written about verbal communication. What do we do when we talk to other people? What it is about? And basically there are two issues to cover. What competences we need in order to be able to be communicating with other people, and how much of what we need of these competences, of this knowledge, is sociocultural, which means how much of what we need to be able to understand other people is what is because we grew up here in Moscow, we are Russians, or we are Australians who are in Brisbane, and many other issues. Next. Second, I don't like anything prevent me from seeing the audience. What is pragmatic control principle? Because we'll be discussing politeness patterns, and I'll briefly try to show you that politeness strategies are governed by a more broader, deeper underlying principle of pragmatic control, which basically can be described as a question: what makes us to be, or at least to seem polite to other people in conversation, and why it's so important, why it is not just part of our upbringing and good manners, but a part of our real communicative competences. Next. And the third part of the lecture, which covers actually 2 slides, but I try to concentrate on it, is how changes in Russian society made Russian language change its politeness strategies. And why politeness strategies? Because actually many things in language change, and there are things that we observe immediately. New words, new concepts. But there are things that we are least conscious of. And these, as I said, politeness patterns, the ways, the patterns according to which we enter communication, and we base our we build our relations with other people in communication with these patterns. So these patterns that we call politeness patterns, they're least visible. We don't see how they are being changed, and that's why we pay probably less attention to them. So that's why I chose this subject, and that subject of, say, borrowings into Russian, though I will mention them too. Now, so that's what I promised, to be brief and short and kind of well-known. How we define language. It is important that on one hand, language is a symbolic system. And if it were not symbols, but just electronic signals, it would be very easy. We just send a signal and the other party just receives it. Bingo, we got the meaning, we have it. But with symbols, symbols ask for interpretation. And that's why polysemy, ambiguity, misunderstandings, cross-cultural communication errors, and stuff like that emerge. On the other hand, language, and this is a definition from a famous world-known linguist, Otto Jespersen, and given, by the way, in 1924, quite a while. On the other hand, language is an activity on the part of one individual to make himself understood by another, and activity on the part of that other to understand what was in the mind of the first. I find this definition of language a brilliant one because it previewed what would happen in linguistics and humanities, by the way, and social studies, 50 or 70 years later, when we would take into account the role of communication, the role of interaction between people. And he spoke about language, but he meant communication, language as means of communication. Next slide. So, which brings us to the, probably we'll give all the slide now, gives us models of communication, and here they are, I won't dwell on it. It's just that models of communication as information exchange are obsolete, because if we had to exchange information really in order to understand each other, we wouldn't be able to finish just one sentence. Because if everything is in the information that we exchange, then we had to say so many things in one sentence that, as I said, it would probably not be finished at all. Next model of communication that was exploited by linguists, philosophers, sociologists is models as just interactions. Just interaction. These models are weak. They don't allow us to understand meanings, how meanings is created and recreated, constructed and reconstructed in the process of communication. These models were good for psychological scientists, especially in the behavioral psychology, that would somehow relate the stimulus and reaction to it. And that was the epoch for that model of communication. The model that we exploit now is models of communications as reconstruction of meaning, an ongoing process of interpretation of interaction. And this is already an interactional process that brings us closer to the topic, to the idea that there are certain patterns in which people who belong to the same discourse community, to the same culture, we would say, language culture, sociocultural. This is the interaction that is based on data processing. We need information to process it. That's why this model is better. And also, this process of interaction is governed by certain pragmatic principles. Principles that make us put most important things first, to say more words, to put more information in issues that are important for us as people, as communicating entities. So, based on data processing and governed by pragmatic principles. Please. And now, that's why we need to look at type of pragmatic competencies that we employ in communication. First, it will be various types of knowledge. I won't dwell on it for long. I just want to mention that lingua cultural schemata, or that's how we academically call sociocultural knowledge, are very important, because a lot of information, a lot of what we use as a background for our communication is grounded in sociocultural knowledge. In this audience, I probably don't have to talk a lot about it, but because you guys, our students, you get a lot of courses devoted to the importance of sociocultural knowledge. And the last part, the second part, is pragmatic principles, basically rules and strategies that govern communicative behavior. Among them are, as I said already, priority principle, which allows us, which makes us put what is most important first, and say routing principle that allows us, when we think about something and want to retell it, allows us to make a route, a way around the events in our memories, and then to put it in a linear sequence of sentences, utterances, and words. A pragmatic control principle governs politeness. And it is related to how a person feels, whether he or she has a right to address another person in a certain way, to make certain suppositions about the partner's behavior, partner's wishes, partner's ideas. And also, pragmatic control principle allows us to be not so polite if we believe that we're in a position to do so. And that's what we were discussing. But this next slide. First, I would like to attract your attention to one more side of it, which is language functions in goal-directed interaction. We all know from the very beginning of our young years that, you know, we speak language in order to be able to exchange information, to say things, to ask for answers, and so on and so forth. In a way, it's a stereotype, while the hell, but a wrong one. You know, we probably use language not only for information exchange, and in most cases not for that. In most cases we try to affect the addressee. We want to make an impact on the world through an addressee, because the only way we can make an impact on the world outside this room, for instance, either by just physical labor, digging something, you know, cutting something, or through an addressee. That's probably how the language emerged, when, you know, people very long ago decided first how to kill the mammoth. They understood they couldn't do it just one person. They needed to get together, and they needed somehow to make arrangements how they would do it. And that's one way how probably the language started. So, making an impact on the world through addressee. Next. And then comes, I hope you can see that it's in such a nice pale pinkish color, yes, which means that I'm going to talk about. It's interaction with the addressee. Yes, anything that is in pinkish color, it's important. Anything that is in kind of greenish color is even more important. So that will give you my priority principle in this presentation. Okay, so interaction with the addressee. It includes regulating social relations, sometimes taking them already as a background, as setup, sometimes maintaining them, and maintaining them. And we base it on two things: either pre-existing sociocultural norms, when we know, okay, this is a person, and well, he's older than me, he's probably higher in the hierarchy, I don't know him very well. That's how I should start asking a question, or just asking what time is it now from this person. We do it unconsciously, very quickly, and we rarely get mistaken. People who don't know these sociocultural norms, they, for instance, foreigners, people who learn our language and our culture, they can make mistakes. And what is the worst part of this story is that when we make mistakes in cases, in tenses, in articles, it's okay, no one is kind of offended. But when we make mistakes here, when we address people wrongly, when we use not the right way of asking or requesting something, this is taken very personally for some reason. We are either considered rude or stupid, or they say, oh, it's their culture. Probably the last is the best answer, because it doesn't blame us, but then it blames our culture, which is also wrong. Okay, and the last discursive factors, I put them here just to make sure that you understand that many of these patterns will operate according to the current situation of current communication situation, or we can, that's what's called discursive factors. They emerge within this and this very communicative event. Here